There we go.
All right, we are here with Lieutenant NJ, and I want to say first off, I appreciate your time very much. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for doing this. I mean, I was really excited when I heard that you were doing this. So, kudos to you. And, this is a heavy lift. So we really appreciate you putting this together.
It's all about the stories, and today it's going to be your story. So I appreciate your time, and let's kick it off. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself prior to the military.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, so let's see, where do I start? I came to the US in 1997. Prior to that, I lived in Nigeria. So I'm originally from Nigeria. And I came to the US in 1997. Got here, started college. I was a pre-med student in college in New York. And then, you live in that college life, all the partying and all that. And because the college I went to, Manhattan Beach ran through the school. So if you weren't in class, you were literally on the beach with speedboats and whatnot. So it was a really interesting college. But anyways, so I was living that life, and I felt like I needed to do more. Like there was something missing. Coincidentally, there was a Marine recruiter, outside the gates one of the days I was leaving school, and then I talked to him, try to get a little bit of context about what the military was like. Went to their MEP station, talked to them a little bit, but seemed too gritty for my personality. And so a couple of weeks later, an Army recruiter showed up at the same spot. He talked to him, and he was like, "Yeah, actually no, it was a Air Force recruiter, Air Force recruiter." So I talked to him. We set up a time to meet up at the MEPS, and then took the ASVAB, did all that, and then the guy, said, "Hey, like great scores," and I was really excited. Um, and then he told me they were gonna pick my job for me, and I was like, "Wait, what?" Now, the only thing that registered in my head at the time was I'm gonna be like a truck driver or a cook or something crazy like that, and I was like, here I am, a pre med student. I was like, if I'm gonna leave pre med, I'm gonna do something big, and so I asked him to give me the slip because back then they would print out a little slip for you with your ASVAB scores, and I took it next door to the Army, and the guy was like, "Man, like phenomenal scores," and this was like about 7 o'clock at night. He was like, "Yeah, I know you're tired, man. Like, I had just finished, finals." He's like,
Mhm.
"Hey, you want some coffee?" "Yeah, man. Yeah, you want a donut too?" I'm like, "Sure." So he's like, he typed some stuff into the computer, spun the computer around, and he was like, "You can pick anything you want with those scores," and that's how I joined the Army. Um, did basic training, did the whole thing, did the airborne school, and then got to my first duty station, which was in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Fort Liberty now is what they call it. Um, and then 9/11 hit. Uh, I remember I was an EMT instructor at the time. I think I was a PFC at the time. I was an EMT instructor when that happened, and you know, our spin up time. I mean, 18 hours, and you were wheels up. So we ended up not going on that deployment on the first wave of the deployment, on the initial wave. We were the first wave, but we're not the initial wave. Um, and we ended up doing that. We were there for like 6 months. Some of us were there for a year, and then came back to the States. So I had been to Afghanistan already. That was my first time in Afghanistan, and it was a different war. Like at that point, it was we concentrated on more like raids, ambushes, you know, um, movement to contacts. We focused on things like that. Um, so it was pretty much the Wild West. So but did that, came back from that deployment, reclassed. At the time, I was I was a medic. I started out as a medic. So, 68 whiskey is what it was. Yeah. So I started off as a medic, and then I reclassed into a laboratory technician because I was like, well, I could use that, in my path, in the medical path. So did that for another couple of years. I wasn't too crazy about it. And so at the point I thought I would get out and just finish my, medical degree and then just, be an MD and continue life. And then I actually started out processing. This was in El Paso, Texas. I started out processing, and I remember driving home after out processing, and my phone rings, and it's a retired sergeant major from Fort Bragg. Yeah, there's this, position that's open. You know, we've been looking to fill the position for about a year and a half, 2 years. You meet all the qualifications and then some. We need you over here. I was like, yeah, lady, I don't know if you know this, but I'm getting out of the army, so you know, hope you find somebody to, fill that billet. Good luck. Hung up the phone. Because at that point I really had it with the army. I just I was not feeling that MOS, put it that way. And then 5 minutes later, the phone rings, and this time it's a guy. Yeah, this is Sergeant Major, blah, blah, blah. I know retired Sergeant Major X, Y, and Z just called you, but what did she tell you? I was like, well, I didn't really give her a chance to tell me anything because I'm out processing. He's like, okay, so I'll give you the elevator pitch. You set your own schedule for the most part. You do PT on your own for the most part. You work 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You don't wear uniforms. You can grow a beard. But it's a rigorous process. And this was leading up to me being an instructor for the Special Forces Medical Sergeants course.
Whoa.
And so, yeah, so he was like, yeah, I mean, that's the elevator pitch, So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. I was like, she should have just said that the entire time. Like, that's what she just that's what she just said initially, and I'm there. So I turned back around, went back to post, um, told the people to cancel my out processing. They were like, yeah, we've already started the process, blah, blah, blah. I called them immediately. I was like, listen, like they've already started and they're saying they can't cancel it. They can't reverse it. He was like, give me a second. He made a phone call literally in like 5 minutes. He was like, they've reversed your process. We're cutting you orders. By tomorrow, you'll receive orders to get to Fort Bragg. How soon can you get here? Can you get here in like 10 days? I'm like, I'll be there tomorrow if you want me to, you know? And so that's how it started. I went back home, packed up my bags and, packed up my apartment. And in a week, I was back at Fort Bragg, to be an instructor over there. And that was a blast. And then while I was there, um, my company commander, very interesting guy, he had been enlisted, a warrant officer, and an officer. They, he was talking to me one day. It was, after work hours. It was like I don't know, like 7 o'clock in the evening, and I was cleaning up my, my lab and my office, and he's like, hey, Sergeant, you're really good at what you do. Like I see how the students respond to you, and you know, like you're no different than any of them. But your level of professionalism is up there. He's like, have you ever considered being an officer? And I gave him the textbook. Like I work for a living, and I earn my living, blah blah blah. And he's like, yeah. But let me tell you, I've been enlisted, I've been a warrant officer, and I've been an officer. He's like, and by far, being an officer has been the best move I've made. He's like, so I asked him why, and it was very simple for him. He said, you get to impact people, you get to make decisions that impact people. And when you talk in a room, people listen, which was contrary to, prior to me going, being a, SF instructor, that was the norm. Like when uh you're lower enlisted or you're just a sergeant, you get into these rooms and people don't really listen. Now you don't listen, but not really, you know. And so for me, I think that's what sold me on it was the fact that my opinion would matter. Um, and so I was like, okay, cool. He was like, yeah, I was like, yeah, just give me a couple of days. I want to think about it. And he was like, no. And I mean, if you know anything about, I think you didn't you go to the through the uh selection course or something?
I did the SFAS, the assessment and selection. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So you understand like that culture. I mean, we all went by first name basis, like from the top of the food chain to the bottom, you know, like and his name was Donald. So I was like, hey Don, like, like I get it, but I'm busy, I got stuff going on. He was like, no, like I need you to see your packet. This was on a Thursday evening. He's like, I
Mhm.
need to see your packet on my desk on Monday morning. So I laughed it off and like, yeah, yeah, like he's like, no, you know, the other side of the discussion where we just chit chatted, that was chit chat. This part of the discussion is an order. And I was just
Wow.
like, okay. I was like, okay. So all weekend I worked on the packet, turned the packet in first thing Monday morning, and I was kind of I don't know, like I felt like, man, like this guy's kind of pulling rank on me, and like I thought we were like cool, and but at the time I didn't understand what he was doing for me. Anyways, I turned the packet in, and then he was like, okay, cool, you've passed the first test, and he red inked the whole thing, and um, he was like, now make all the changes I've asked you to make, and then submit the packet. I'm glad I listened to him because at the time the requirement was, I believe you had to have 90 credits towards a bachelor's degree to get selected to OCS. And then when you get selected, you can finish out your bachelor's degree and carry on with life. While I was at Fort Benning, a Milper message came out, which stated that you could not be accepted to OCS anymore without your full bachelor's degree. So I was the last class with that requirement of having 90 degrees towards a
Oh, nice.
bachelor's degree. And I did not know that. And I don't think he knew that either. It's just, it's one of those things where, like being a good soldier, you just do what you're told. And, I mean, you trust your leaders. And if they're competent leaders, you trust their leaders, your leadership, and then you just do what you're told. And, I'm so glad that I took his advice and did what he told me to do. But anyways, so that's how I started on my path towards being an officer. Went through OCS. I chose the OCS route because I didn't want any break in service. I felt like if I went to college, I'd get wrapped up in that college life again, drinking, chasing girls, and then I wouldn't be focused when it came time. So I chose the OCS route because that would keep me plugged into the Army. And then, but yeah, did that and, you know, um, went through the engineer basic officer leader course. So EBOLIC is what we call it. Um, and that's how I became an engineer. Um, Infantry was pretty much all taken up. My background with 82nd when I first came in, of course, I was a medic, but they there are different tiers of medics in the infantry. Like um, when you're really good, or when they assess that you're really good, they put you towards um, special missions. I guess you fall under like you know special projects and things like that. And so I got taken out of my platoon and I was put with the battalion scouts. And I mean, all those guys were all Ranger tabs. Like they were all like the best of the best were in that platoon. And that was my first taste of like actually like working with SF dudes because in turn we got detached from the battalion scouts when we got deployed. We were with I can't remember if it was 3rd or 7th Special Forces Group, that we spent most of our time with. We were detached from our battalion most of the deployment. I think we saw our battalion maybe 3, 4 times, something like that. But for the most part, we were attached to special forces groups doing missions. So that was my first taste of, being with the soft component of the Army. And I really liked it. So I was like, okay, like this is what I want to do, when I grow up, this is what I want to do. But yeah, um so going back to, post OCS, um I went through the engineer basic officer leader course, and then I got stationed at I got orders for JBLM, so Fort Lewis at the time. I believe that was in 2000, end of 2010. It was around Christmas time, I remember. Because I remember it was really cold when we got there. That was my first exposure to those kind. Well, not the first. It was kind of a wet cold. I just remember it was just like dreary. Um, but yeah, so I remember I got to the unit at nighttime. I can't remember who I spoke to, and the person was like, "Yeah, just come back the next morning, when everybody's here because everybody's split."
Mhm.
Uh, so I came back the next day, started doing all my in processing. I went to battalion, which was across the street from our building. Um, went there, started my in processing, did all that all day, and then came to the 22nd to do my company in processing. And I just remember uh, that day was interesting. I remember while I was in processing, I remember I didn't even know that was 22nd. All I knew was that was a row of the engineer companies,
Right.
right? Because once you cross the road from battalion, then uh, the first set of buildings in that chain was 22nd, and I just remember it just seemed chaotic. It looked like that, like you're in a beehive. There's just a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people just moving and doing things. Not sure what they're doing, but they're doing things. And I was like, wow, like those guys are really busy. So when I came to the when I remember when I came to the company, uh, I think that was the first time in my military career. At this point, I'd been in the Army like for about 10 years. I had crossed over as a sergeant first class and then became a lieutenant. So, I spent more than a day in the Army already at that point, and I knew what right looked like and I knew what wrong looked like. And that was the first unit that I saw soldiers within earshot of both battalion. So battalion sergeant major, battalion commander, XOs, like higher ranking folks, your company commander, your first sergeant, platoon sergeant, those guys. And soldiers are just outside just smoking and joking. I think one or two of the dudes were on the hood of their cars, like I was just like, what is going on here? Like, so that was my first impression of the 22nd. And then when I walked upstairs, I can't remember what NCO I talked to on the way upstairs. And I was asking for the where the company commander was and where the first sergeant was so I could go introduce myself. But as I was coming upstairs, I could hear that NCO and somebody else. It seemed like they had just come out of a meeting. And I don't know what was going on in that meeting, but they seemed confused. Like there was like they didn't know what was going on. Like
Hmm.
it was confusion bordering frustration, it seemed like. At least that was the sentiment that I got. Um, and then, I was like, hey guys, like where's the company commander or first sergeant located? And then they kind of looked at me, you see a butter bar and they're like, oh yeah, I know exactly who you are. You're the new guy. And so they pointed me in the right direction, and I went there, introduced myself. I remember in that little where the company commander, the ops room is, and all that kind of stuff. Like it just seemed it seemed it seemed chaotic. It seemed chaotic. I think that's the best way to describe it. It almost seemed like things were coming down from battalion or brigade, and the company commander and the first sergeant were, trying to figure out what exactly was going on and how they're going to translate it to and transmit it to the platoon sergeants and let it filter down to the company. It just seemed chaotic. I remember that sentiment. I almost it's almost, I remember feeling like I don't want to bother people. That's the sentiment I got because there was just so much going on. I didn't feel like being a bother. So I was like, I think I popped in. I was like, hey, sir, my name is such and such. I'm coming. I'm here in processing, but I'm sure we'll have time to catch up because it seems like you guys are busy. And then he gave me a quick introduction, shook my hand, all that kind of stuff, and just the basic stuff. And then he's like, yeah, let me take you to the first sergeant. Took me to the first sergeant. First sergeant was first sergeant Gordius. he was he was in first sergeant Gordius mode, like you know just talking to this person, giving orders to that person, like saying this to this person, and like he had a lot to manage. And then he had a second, and he's like, "Hey, sir, come on into the office," and he calls me in and gives me like I can't remember what we talked about. Gives a quick spiel, and then I was out of there, and I was like, wow, like that was. I remember almost feeling bad for him, like I was like, man, like, because I mean, I'd been in units like combat units before, like, and I prepared for deployment. So I understand, the chaos. But I was like, man, like I didn't at that time I didn't know that, first the company was just standing up.
Mm.
And secondly, like we're on the path to deployment. I didn't know that at the time. And afterwards, when I put everything together, and I was like, that's why the place was buzzing, like um, but then, I feel like the first person I might have talked to when I first not the person that asked for directions.
Mm.
After I came out from the first sergeant and the company commander's office, I think the first person I ran into was Simcoe. And you know, we shook hands. I told him who I was. Welcome to the unit, and I just remember. I don't know. It was just weird. Like I almost felt like I knew him. I think I might have even told him that. Like I feel like I know you from somewhere. It was just weird, but I mean, he was a sergeant first class at the time, so it's quite possible that we might have crossed paths somewhere. But I think I remember telling him like I feel like I know you from somewhere, and we tried to start figuring it out, and we couldn't figure it out. So he was like, yeah, like I got to go, talk to my platoon and um, debrief them and let them know what just came out of this meeting. And cool. And then he took off, and then I think the next person I saw was Fuller. I think it was Fuller. Yeah, I think it was Fuller. I think it was the next person I saw. And then I think I saw Paleo like later on that evening. I just remember like, man, like that's gonna be my gym buddy. That's all I remember. Because at that time I was heavy into the gym too, and he was a massive dude. So I was like, yeah, that's gonna be my gym buddy. He's gonna get me right. Uh, but um, but yeah. So you know, quick introductions, real quick, and I was out of there. I was tired, man. Like it'd been a long day, and I was just like, I'm out of there. Um, and then Christmas leave, the preparations for Christmas leave started happening, and people are trying to do last minute things, and so I'm doing my in processing. I was advised to just like focus on in processing, just take as much time as I want, finish it because there's nothing going on. It's just Christmas leave. That's the next thing that's coming up, and then just report. I think January 2nd was when we reported, I believe, and so that was my first time in the unit, January 2nd, 2011, and then reality started setting in. That's when I started getting an understanding of what was going on. Um, yeah, I started getting to understand. I think I'd met some of the lieutenants before we went on leave. But then I remember that's when, after January, that's when I started understanding what was really going on. Because of course, I mean, you're the new guy. You don't know anybody. Like it's just I, I was I don't think I was focused. I wasn't focused on trying to get to know everything at once.
Mhm.
Because again, this was my first rodeo. I was like, I mean, Christmas leave, nobody's thinking about anything anyway. So, when we get back, then, we'll do what we have to do and then make things happen. But um, so I didn't have any of the lieutenants that I could, fall back on and be like, hey, just like brief me up on, what's going on and this and that. Like, I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna just wait until after block leave. And so that's what happened. And then I got a clear picture of what was going on, and like the company was a new company getting ready for deployment. There had been a couple of uh, new leaders in the company. I believe the first sergeant and the company commander were new at the time. I think. Um, but yeah, so that's when it really dawned on me what was going on. I was like, okay, like, and we're deploying in what, 6 months or something like that. I was like, this is going to be a very interesting deployment. Um, and then all the training kicked in, and I just remember, I mean, again, I was transitioning from a very different army and different role into being an engineer. And then I'd heard at, BOLIC, um, at the basic officer leader course, I had heard that, the engineer world was very different. And I was like, yeah, it can't be that different, like it's all army, but it was, it was very different. Um, there was a lot of training going on, all the pre-deployment training, having your shots, all that stuff was going on. And um, yeah, it was a very interesting time. Um, I also remember, I mean, at some point I had to have surgery. I think it was like 2 months till the deployment or something like that. I had to have surgery. I had a hernia that was really bothering me to the point where I couldn't even run. Actually, two hernias, and so I had to take care of that before I went on deployment. I remember Captain Lau asking me, like, "Are you sure that you can go on this deployment?" I mean, because that's going to be challenging if you're just coming off of surgery. I was like, it's just another deployment. I mean, it's nothing. And so, we did that, and but I want to say, I I felt like, I mean, the leadership, you know, platoon sergeants, the company commander, the first sergeant, like, thinking back, I mean, they were doing the best they could given the situation, you know, and I mean, I gave them lots of kudos, you know. In the moment, it felt chaotic, but when you have time to reflect, I mean, you're just like, wow, like, especially after being a company commander myself, I'm like, wow, like, these guys were literally drinking through the fire hose, and trying to put a company together, all your readiness, training, admin stuff, like all that. And then, of course, I mean, there was a little, you know, misconduct issues, let me say,
Mhm.
um, that they had to deal with too. So that was a lot. Um, but I remember also feeling um, that this that the support system wasn't there for the soldiers. I felt like the soldiers were, I mean, rightfully so. Like, I mean, they were being overworked, and not a lot of family time. Um, I felt like, I mean, the FRG also, I mean, they did what they could do, but it almost felt like I went to like a couple of FRG meetings, and it almost felt like I didn't feel like I was getting anything out of it. I mean, my wife was new in the unit too in Washington, so having that support system is key, especially during deployments, but I don't feel like there was much in terms of support. And so it just was. And then there was an incident early on that I'd had with one of the lieutenants, because at the time, I guess, it was dark. This was prior to January. It was dark, and I had parked in uh, one of the lieutenant's spots, and I didn't know. Like, I mean, I didn't even know that it was so dark. It was pitch black. Like the place got pitch black at like 5 o'clock in the evening. And this was like after 6 or something like that. So I just pulled up, parked, and then I went upstairs, talked to the company commander, came outside, and I saw some people working back there, and I wanted to just go say hi. And when it was time for me to leave, we were just talking, and then when it was time for me to leave, I go downstairs, and whoever's, I don't want to say the person's name. I don't want to hear it. It's just a funny story. So I'm not going to say the person's name, but he had parked in front of my car to block me in. Maybe he thought I was like maybe one of the soldiers, or I don't know what he thought, like. And so I go back upstairs. I'm like, yeah, whose car is this and this and that, and he had an attitude and something about that's my parking spot, and I was just like, okay, Lieutenant. Yeah, I mean, you just learned how to tie your shoelaces yesterday. I've been at this for a while. I know, and I had to educate him on regulations. The only person who's authorized the parking spot in any garrison is the garrison commander. And then the garrison commander could authorize all the parking spots in the PX and blah, blah, blah. Lieutenants are not authorized parking spots. So if you don't move your car, I will be running over your car in about 5 minutes when I get downstairs. And that was, it was, it was an unnecessary exchange, but I was like, man, like this guy has a overinflated sense of himself, like, and so like that was a turnoff for me. I remember Demona, coming through and was like, hey, don't worry about it. Sometimes, there's, he just has a bad attitude. And Demona was always cool. Like, I remember Demona was always a cool dude. Like, and then I realized that, he was enlisted. He was an enlisted dude like myself too. So he was uh, a hybrid, So that even, we bonded, off that a little bit more. But I just remember like, man, that was like a very unnecessary exchange. And so you add that to my perception of what the company was with all the chaos and the soldiers being overworked and no time for family. And I was just like, man, this is a lot. Like, I don't feel like I fit here. I think that was the first time in my military career that I felt like I didn't fit somewhere. I didn't, coming into a unit, I didn't feel like I had a bond with anyone. But I was like, yeah, you know what? Like, I mean, we're just gonna go do the deployment. I mean, who knows? I mean, deployments bring out a different side of people, so who knows? Right. So, um, but yeah. And I remember, I mean, my wife, I mean, of course, we just got to the place. My wife was pregnant at the time. So that was, I mean, leaving on that deployment was a very hard thing for me. I mean, of course, I talked with her a couple of times, and I think we decided that she would go back and stay with her parents while I was gone. We just put our stuff in storage, and then she would head back to Montana and go, hang with her parents. Because I just felt like the support wasn't there, and deployments are hard enough. I think deployments are harder on spouses and families than they are on soldiers. Because soldiers, we have ourselves. I mean, we have that family with us all the time. Whether it sucks or not, we still have our soldier family, our Army family with us. But the spouses, our kids, if they don't have that tight knit support, again, like I'm coming from a special operations unit. That support is something else. I mean, those are lifelong support systems. Like, I mean, you form like, it's almost like they become like your brothers and your sisters. Like, it's very tight knit. And then juxtaposed with what I was, experiencing, I was just like, oh man, this is not support. So I think we made the decision that she would go back and stay with her family, and I would do the deployment. And at some point when my son was born, I would come back, and um, or I would show up for the birth. At least I'd be there for the birth, and then I'd head back, and depending on what time frame we are in the deployment. So that was tough. Um, that was tough. But then we got on the buses. I remember that was the last vision I had. All the soldiers were lined up, and then we got on the buses and said goodbye to the families, and it was go time.
Okay, let's pause here for our first break.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, that's the last thing I remember. Seeing the company in formation. We did the formation, got on the buses. I remember seeing my wife, outside. And then we started driving away. And, for me, it wasn't like that was nothing new to me. I mean, driving away, like that, like I'd done that like multiple times because I'd done different like small, deployments here and there, and the Afghanistan deployment and training with, so driving away from family wasn't uh too disheartening for me or too emotional for me. But I remember, I forget, I looked back and I saw the faces of the soldiers, and I felt really sad for them. One, because of course, I didn't know who had deployed and who hadn't. So at that point, but the look on their face is like despair, and like they're walking into the unknown. I'd been in Afghanistan, and I understood the landscape. I was like excited going back just to see if anything had changed. Um, at that point, we'd transitioned from uh, full scale combat to like the counterinsurgency fight, and so I knew it was going to be different. It was going to be more diplomatic, more political. Uh, you would be more hamstrung in your decision making, but I was I was excited to see what it evolved into. But I just remember seeing the soldiers' faces, and I felt bad for them, especially the young soldiers. I mean, with their families and the ones that had kids, and the kids were crying, and I felt really bad for them. So yeah, I mean, I don't even remember getting on the plane. I think I had been so used to airborne timelines. You get on the bus, you get on the plane, get rigged, and you're on the plane, wake up in another country. I'd been so used to that. So my routine was as soon as I got on the bus, I go to sleep. Like, because this movie is gonna play regardless. I'm gonna go to sleep, and I'm gonna wake I'm gonna wake up in a different country, and it's gonna be the same exact thing. Like, I've done this a million times. So, and that's exactly what happened. Like, I don't remember getting on the planes. Um, I remember driving away in the buses, and that was it. The next thing I remember is being in Afghanistan. That heat hits you, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this is definitely not California. We're not in NCC." you know, like that heat it's almost like opening like man, like it's almost like you've been baking, and then you go to check your pastry, and you open it, and that first wave of heat hits you. Yeah, that's what Afghanistan was always like, and so once that hit me, I was like, yeah, we're in the right spot. And then and then we start doing all that in processing through CAF, um and then we got to Where were we? Passab? No. Was it Passab? Oh, am I mixing two? Was
No,
Passab, right?
Pascal was us, yeah.
Yeah, Passab. Okay. Yeah. The first time I was there, I was in RC South. Passab was also like part of RC South, but yeah, we were down very like almost to there was a river or something back like, to our south. So, but yeah, and then we got to Passab and um, but yeah, and then we got to the tents. At the time, I was before we left, I was assigned as and I was the catch-all for everything the XO didn't want to do, or everything that the company commander didn't have the bandwidth to do. So the hazmat OIC, the maintenance OIC, the supply OIC, the company intelligence support team OIC, like just name it. Put a designation and put OIC behind it, and that was it. Like I'm just like, like I was like, okay, well, I mean, thankfully, like I had good relationships with the NCOs that were, in charge of, either I think I forget who was it Feely? I think Feely was the one who was supply, and um I forget the gentleman's name that was the mechanics. Um and there was somebody else that was in charge of hazmat, but um doesn't really matter. But I had good relationships with those folks, and so you know we made things happen. But I remember, leading up to the deployment, like the company intelligence support team, uh, it was a new concept, and I was still trying to figure out, how to implement, you know, um, what strategy I was going to use and how that thing would be of value. Because when we're in NTC, I mean, we did some training in NTC. That training there was no like zero value. Essentially, they were reading out of some kind of a handbook. They were trying to read out of a handbook, and I think they spent more time explaining what the tools were, like the bats and hide, and
Mhm.
they spent more time explaining what, like trying to figure out what those tools did and their capabilities and how to operate them and troubleshoot them. I think they spent more time doing that than you know what the function and role of the company intelligence support team is. Um, I remember in NTC feeling very frustrated that that I wasn't getting clear guidance as to what this thing was going to be. Um, and then I think when Captain Lau, at some point, he saw that there was not much of a demand from that training. Then, I became the slide guy, that put this slide together, and the platoons are going to be moving out and put the timelines and all their like put all that stuff together on a spreadsheet of some sort and color code it and all kind of stuff so we could see where they are in the battlefield and kind of monitor the movements and overlay, workflow. And so that's what I ended up spending my time doing when we're in NTC. And now we're in Afghanistan. I'm still trying to figure out like how this thing is gonna be. And it was just myself and I believe Slagle was the guy, Specialist Slagle. Um, it was just us for the most part. And so I had him, try to figure out the systems to tie into, and then I would try and do some analysis on whatever battalion was pushing down and, see how, it could benefit the platoons. So that's what we did. During the day, there was somebody else. There was another set of folks. I can't remember who it was, but I worked. I worked I was like a swing shift. I would come in early in the day and work all through the night and leave super like in the morning when, folks came in for the changeover brief. And sometimes I would stay past that, so I was working easily over 14 hours straight. Like it was, oh man, that was horrible. That was horrible. I remember that. And but yeah, we'd have these briefs like at night when everybody's, either asleep or people are on mission or whatever. And we'd have some briefs from battalion, or they would send some slides down and, or some notes down, or, you would watch all the SIG acts happen and you try to put it into some kind of a document that captures all this information. I remember trying to figure out like how do I, like, this is just so much information. How do I condense it down to something where like the platoons could just take it with them and it could be value added? I want there was somebody else. It might have been, God, I don't know who it was. I had that discussion with, and we started trying to brainstorm. It might have been First Sergeant Gordius or Captain Lau. I can't remember now. We're trying to figure out like how this thing could be like maybe like a 1 page or 2 pages, maybe, and trying to figure out like if it's something like they could just take on the route with them. But for the most part, like, I don't know. I don't think it was, I think all in all, I don't think it was too valuable to them. And I think that's because they didn't understand the environment, one. Two, when they would come in, they were supposed to come in before they rolled out on mission, and get a brief and, let me point at things and tell you, what I saw that just happened. It ended up morphing into, I would just go out to the motor pool and talk to the platoon before they rolled out. That way multiple people heard it. Because that was one of the first flaws that I noticed. If it was just the PL that was listening to it, well, if he's sleep deprived just like everybody else, he's getting 3-4 hours of sleep, if that. So if he doesn't catch it, nobody else catches it. So that's how it morphed into, I would go to the motor pool and brief the entire platoon. Hey, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. And if there were grids that were provided where we saw some kind of activity, somebody burying, command wire or IEDs, we would provide those grids. But I don't know. Even me, like I remember when I took over as a platoon leader, like trying to take that information and make it actionable. Even if you gave me a grid, well, this is plus or minus how many meters, maybe 100 to 1,000 meters, like, you know. So I don't know. Like now that I think about it, I'm just like, man, like I don't know how much value that. I understand the intent, but the companies were not trained for that. The companies were not trained for that. Intelligence generally is a battalion function. Generally, because the first intelligence officer you get most of the time is in the battalion, and it's normally a captain. So they would, no indictment on their abilities. They did what they could do and provided what their hire was telling them they should provide to the companies. And we in turn interpreted it the best we could with no education and, how to translate that information. So, but I think it was of some value because there were some things that were actionable. Like you could tell, okay, like within this vicinity, okay, this might be happening. We saw a guy, like, we were briefed that they saw a guy last night in this vicinity doing X, Y, and Z. you could use that information. But yeah, so I did that for, I don't know. mm, I want to say we got there in June. I think I did that till sometime in October. And then I switched out as I took Damona's place. I took Damona's place and he took my place. Um, but yeah, I remember, when we were doing our, you know, I guess what would be not even a left seat, right seat. That was a more of a hot seat. Like, hey, like, dude, like, here's everything I need to. Like over time, he would come around after missions, and I would tell him what I did and how we could use the information and who his contacts were and all this kind of stuff. And so he had a decent understanding of at least what I did and what my system was, uh, and then he could morph it into whatever you know his vision was for it was. But I remember telling him one time, I was like, dude, like, you're gonna see dudes get hurt out here, and there's gonna be times when you feel like you could have done a better job. It was your fault. If only I provided this one information, or if because that I remember that messing with me. Like when I would do all this work and I'd provide those information, and then I would hear that second platoon got blown out, third platoon got blown out. First, I was like, and in my mind, like at the time, I was like, but I gave you the grids, and at the time, that's what I would think. And then when I became a PL, I realized even with the grids, like something that could have been a decoy. They could have been, you know, planning to use that IED for another period,
Hmm.
And implement something else down the road. Like there's a whole bunch of variables, you know. But I remember feeling bad, like when I would hear, a platoon take a hit, and then I'm like, man, like didn't the information work? And I don't know, like it messed with me for a little bit. But then when I think I reconciled in my head how like the dynamics of how the information is being transmitted to us, interpreted, and then transmitted to the platoons. Um, and don't get me wrong, like it's not like I was out there like dissecting information like to the like for the most part, I would take what the battalion gave me, I would read it, try to understand what was going on, interpret it into my terms that I knew that platoon leaders could assimilate. And if there were grids that they provided, I would provide the grids too. Initially, it was just like a written form of, and then we implemented a map in there and with dots and, but it took a little bit of time, for it to morph into, and then when the Demona took over, then it morphed into something else. Um, but yeah, I was like, dude, like, don't feel bad when things don't go, when the information you think you're providing, if you hear that a platoon gets hit, it's not your fault. I remember telling them that, so I was like, don't beat yourself up. Um, just do the best you can. And then, it is what it is, because I mean, let's face it, route clearance missions, our function as a route clearance element is plainly to find the IED or the IED finds you. Forget about what doctrine says. In plain English, that's exactly what our job description was. Yeah, you could interdict, IEDs, and you can do all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you're either going to find or it's going to find you. Right? That's just the bottom line. So we swapped out sometime in October 2011. But prior to that, like, yeah, the platoons were getting beat up pretty bad. Third platoon was getting beat up pretty bad. I think at the time, like, they were on a streak of just like, I don't know, like, it seemed like every time they went out the wire, like, they were getting hit. Like, it almost became like a thing where we expected, like, okay, like, once third platoon rolled out the wire, like, then we, got on the monitors and started watching their movement, trying try to make sure that, I mean, we did that for all the platoons. There was always somebody designated to stay there and watch and see if anything hokey was happening. But we did that for all the platoons, but especially for third, because they were just getting hit so hard. Like, so I remember when Captain Lau told me, like, I'd be switching out and I'd switching out with third platoon. I was like, holy crap, man. Like, like I'm about to get my ass handed to me. Um, but I don't know. Like, I almost feel like, I mean, those guys, kudos to everyone in that platoon. Holy smokes, you know. But they were taking a beating, and um, it's easy to just, I don't want to use the word complacency, but they were slowly getting there. You get to the point, and you probably relate to this. You get to the point where you just almost your actions are almost robotic. Like, you just do stuff, you know, and that's when you start forgetting about little principles, like paying attention to what was happening on the routes, AARs, like all that basic army stuff. um, but yeah, they were just getting, oh man, like I felt bad for them. I remember when my first time I rolled out, and the night before I had a chat with Simcoe, and I was like, okay, so, like, I'm gonna level with you. Like, I know what you guys have been doing because I've kind of observed what you guys have been doing, but I am by no means the expert. You are the expert. So if it's okay with you, I will hang back for X amount of weeks. And he just started laughing. He's like, yeah, I got you, sir. You know, well, not laughing, but he just had the Simcoe smirk is what I called it, because he always had a dip in. But he just had a smirk, and he's like, yeah, I got you, sir. Like, but I knew that because, I mean, coming in again, I was an NCO before. I dealt with lieutenants coming in thinking that they're hot shit and they know all this stuff, and that's how people get killed. You know, and going in, I understood the guys had a very high respect for Simcoe. They also respected Demona, but I feel like Demona was almost too friendly with the soldiers, and I don't know. Sometimes it just felt like there should have been more separation between him and the soldiers. Like, I mean, that's what the platoon sergeant is there for, is that buffer. But it's just his personality. He's such a likable guy. People just gravitate to him. So it's not anything that he was doing wrong. It's just like, in my NCO life, I had dealt with soldiers, with lieutenants that would come in, and Demona definitely was not this person, but I dealt with lieutenants that would come in, think that they're hot stuff, and then all of a sudden, like, somebody's getting dead. So I didn't want to be. I knew going in I was not going to be that lieutenant, and so I had that discussion with Simcoe. But the guys had deep respect for Simcoe. They had deep respect for Demona. They had their bond formed because they had done the NTC training together. They had done all that, I think the Yakima training together. They had already done what, like 4 months of deployment together. So that bond was strong. And then here comes the new guy who has been who has been giving us this company intelligence reports that, and we're still getting our asses handed to us. I mean, some of them found out that I was an NCO prior, and they gave me a certain level of respect. But I knew going in that I had to define my role in the platoon. I was not going to go in and try to be Demona because I'm not him. Um, I wasn't gonna. I was gonna watch what the platoon did and observe and have to make quick changes. I knew that going in. But my number one priority, I still remember I was in the talk, like one of my very like last shifts as the company intelligence support officer. I was writing out what my goals were for the platoon when I took over. And I wrote down this exhaustive list of things I wanted to accomplish. And then I eliminated a bunch of stuff, and I limited it down to like, I think one or two. And my top priority was get these guys safely back to their families. That was my number one priority. I think the second priority was to form good habits that will support my first priority. And so it was very simple. For me, it was very simple. It wasn't, I didn't have these like, like long thesis and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to form teams and beat a team of teams and nonsense. No, like my number one priority is get these guys back to their families. And number two priority, form good habits that will support number one priority. That was it. And so that was my going in attitude. So I remember talking to the platoon and letting them know, like, okay, like, I've had a chance to observe you guys, and kudos to you guys. And I mean, you guys have been kicking ass and taking names, and but there's some bad habits that have been formed. And so we have to get back to the basics. Let's keep doing what we're doing, but we have to start paying attention to the basics, because the basics is what's going to get us out of here alive. And so, little things like, I think I had smelled cigarettes on somebody, and I was like, "Are you guys smoking in the cars and in the vehicles?" And because in my mind, if you're smoking, then your attention is somewhere else. And if your attention is somewhere else and not on the road, that's when bad things happen. So I understood. I mean, those guys were doing like sometimes like 15, 16, 18 hours straight. So I didn't. It was never my intention for the deployment to be a smoking cessation, routine. So we implemented things like stopping at different cops. We would stop and take a break for like, I don't know, like sometimes 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. That way the guys could reset. We literally would pull into a cop. I would go get a brief from the intel guys and the cop. And then we had footballs with us. We would take footballs with us. Everybody would drop their gear, because now we're in the safety of the cop. We would drop our gear, and we'd literally throw footballs, and people would eat chow and like just relax. Just turn your brain off for a second for the second half of this stuff. Just little things like that. So we implemented that. We implemented things like AARs after every single time after mission. And I know the guys hated me for it, because I mean, those were some long days. Initially, the AARs would take like 30 minutes. And I was like, listen, like it's going to hurt in the beginning, but the more we do this, we start identifying what's going on. And then these things would get shorter and shorter, because we shouldn't be making the same mistake twice. And it did over time. Initially, it would be me leading the AAR, and then me and Simcoe the standard, okay, what happened, what did we do right and wrong, or what did we do right and what can we do better, like format. And I think when I saw the shift was when the soldiers would start talking. Yeah, we did this and we did that and we did this, and but before it was just me and Simcoe leading it and soliciting feedback from them. Once they took over and it became a discussion, I think that's when it really clicked for us. And we saw the number of hits we were taking was reduced. I don't know if it had anything to do with anything, but I just know that we weren't getting hit as much because we would change our tactics. We wouldn't like if we were going if there was a turnaround on one of our routes, we wouldn't use the same turnaround. Sometimes we would go all the way to the end. Sometimes we'll stop short. Like so, we kept the insurgents on their toes, trying to figure out where they're going to place this thing. We identified issues with the GPR, when you want to go over like wet gravel and, like something with the images and all that. And we would talk to the Corps of Engineers, like those folks, and, try to figure out like a way to mitigate that. What else did we do? Our security posture when when IEDs were being interrogated, like 360 security, guns out, like, and everybody scanning. Like the gyro cams were up and the 50 cals were up there and the machine guns were up there, like everyone was ready. So just little things like that. And also like I'm sure I don't know. I don't know this for a fact, but I imagine Damona had them doing the same thing too. But I had everybody taking notes, like so I could see things from different vantage points. Because I mean, I was like I don't know, like the fifth or sixth truck back, something like that, fourth or fifth or sixth truck back. Like, so sometimes it's hard to see from all the way back there. So I was very dependent on, the GPR operators, my team leaders that were, the roller teams, and, Tim Hallberg and Camacho and Kukuro and those guys. Holy smokes, man. I haven't even said those names in so long. Like those guys were freaking rock stars, man. Like those guys were who else? Niehaus. And those guys were freaking rock stars, man. Like those guys were absolutely amazing. Like the level of proficiency, like when they told me, hey sir, this is going on, I trusted their word 100%. 100%. Because they had never given me a reason not to. Holy smokes, that just flashed, man. Like, holy smokes, yeah. Those guys were absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. The soldiers were great too. Because I mean, like we would come back and they would have to get right. I mean, sometimes we would send a couple of dudes to, go bring chow for everybody else, and the rest of us would be in the motor pool. While the rest of them will be in the motor pool, I would be over there putting these reports together, and that took a while because a lot of times the computer was down and you got to wait around and talk to the commander and debrief, and it was just so, man. Yeah, I haven't even thought about that for a while, but yeah, the soldiers would just drop whatever, get back to, drop their gear, get to the motor pool and start putting things together, like get those vehicles ready, clean out the vehicles. Like that was another thing. Like when we're done with mission, the vehicles have to be cleaned out. It's not a continuation from yesterday. Everything has to be cleaned out. And so we clean it out, fuel it up. Anything that was broken, we start fixing it. Like it was some long days. Holy smokes. But yeah, I remember being really impressed and really proud of our soldiers. Like I don't know if I hope they've had time to reflect over these years, but man, like the stuff they accomplished, man, and you look back, like the stuff they accomplished was beyond amazing. Like it's incomprehensible. If I went and talked to a civilian right now and told the soldiers what they did, they would have no clue, zero clue what
Right.
they would know. They would hear the words, but they would have no idea what the impact was. But those soldiers like freaking rocked it, man. I couldn't think of one person. I can't think of one person that I would say like, okay, we have to, I'm sure the soldiers couldn't think of that person, but from my vantage point, I couldn't think of one person that was like, man, we need to pull this person and, get this person on the team and like pick up their slack. And these guys were always on it. But yeah, we changed some things around and just implemented some painful changes, but it paid off,
Mhm.
it really paid off. Um, it really paid off. Like even the incident with what's his name? Darius.
Right, and I just we got about 4 minutes, so
Okay.
just mindful of that.
So even the incident with Darius, like that was no fault of ours. You had the infantry. It was if I remember correctly, it was a combined uh it was a combined arms mission. Well, you had these. I remember we're driving up, and I think I remember. I vaguely remember telling Simca, I'm like, man, this is bad. There were vehicles all over that road, just staged on the main road, not in the cop, which was like literally look to your right. That's where they were. They staged all the vehicles, like how many, a mile, 2 miles down the road. Like it was just all vehicles. I was like, this is bad. Like we're sitting ducks right here. We're about to get ambushed. And that's exactly what happened. You know, I remember when, like I got the Reese went down. I was like, holy smokes. Like it started, you know, and our guys like were quick to, who was it? Like, was it Manchester that was up there at the time in my truck? I can't remember who hopped up there, but man, all I heard was just like the 50 cal just going, and I remember being so mad. I got summoned to their talk, and I can't remember if it was the S3, the battalion S3, or the battalion XO that I had some words with, that Simcoe like had to extract me from losing my rank. Yeah, I was so pissed. I remember being so mad that day. Um, but yeah, things happen. I mean, it's combat, so things happen. But yeah, once we made those changes, for the most part, the shenanigans uh decreased quite a lot. At least we could predict our movements, and we could put the insurgents on defense.
Mm.
We could have them thinking, where are we going to hit these people next? And we would just shift our tactics. Sometimes we would switch up the routes. They would think that we're going to be going, to this other route, and then we'd take a right and go to the other route. Let's go hit this route first and then come back. And it throws them off their timing. As long as they didn't interfere with, the infantry's movement through the battle space. So we would just keep them guessing, and knock on wood. I think, yeah, a couple of guys, were concussed, from IED blast. Nothing too severe. I don't remember anything too severe. Um, I think the Reese was the most severe casualty we took. One casualty too many, but I was glad that things calmed down.
Let's pause here for our next break. One.
But yeah, so yeah, that the incident with Darius, like, um, like I said, when you're in combat, you do what you were trained to do. But I felt like that was definitely something that the higher ups could have planned better so that we could stage better. I understand that you couldn't stage every single vehicle within the uh the cop that was adjacent to us. I get that. But there was plenty of land to where we could have staged closer within the cop, closer to the cop, and even if it was an S-shaped formation, so that we could snake out onto the road and then peel out. Because even as I remember walking to their talk, and I point out to Simca, I'm like, what happened to all this land right here? Like it's literally in front of your cop. You know, there must have been some kind of a decision that was made, and maybe some risk management mitigation type thing that happened, and they were like, no, let's not just do it here. Like I don't know, I wasn't part of the decision making process at their decision making process at that time, um but I just remember I remember again just rolling up, and like as far as your eyes can see, it was just vehicles on the road. We're supposed to be coming in, clearing the route so that they could follow behind us, and we can't even get through.
Mhm.
you know and then God, I don't know how long we were there. It must have been like, it felt like a long time. Because I remember even like the sun coming through the windshield and just superheating you, because those windows almost served as magnifying glasses, like, and that heat just gets to you and you just like start getting like super hot, and I'm just like, and it starts draining the life out of you. You just start getting really tired, which is fun. I mean, you're in a vehicle, and I mean, literally, like the life is being drained out of you, like, and I'm like, man, like we need to start moving, because I'm starting to get worried because my guys are getting fatigued, and I mean, we're just sitting here doing nothing. And then finally, we're trying to figure out where we are in the order of march, and how they're going to move us to the front so we can do our mission. And some guy comes around and he's like, no, 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 you guys engineers, yeah, yeah, like, pull up over here, you pull up over here, and he's trying to like scoot vehicles past us and like all kinds of shenanigans. Like, so you know when the shot hit Doris, like I just remember I was angry. I was furious. I mean, because now like we have a casualty. These guys are asking, trying to get reports, and we're sending reports back to our talk. But the battle space owner is trying to get reports. The folks in the cop are trying to get reports like what's happening there with the engineers, and then they summon us to come into their talk. You know, like my formation now is fractured because one of the vehicles rolled as they were trying to like reposition. We got to get a vehicle or two or three maybe to get back to take Doris back to the talk to our talk, back to Pasab, or to the nearest car. 'Cause I don't think that the cop over there could support his injuries. So I think I can't remember if it was me or Simcoe. I think it was Simcoe that made the decision to take him all the way back. So we have a fractured formation where I think about QRF coming through and augmenting us so we could finish whatever this mission is. My guys just witnessed their friend getting shot. Like, I mean, it was just so much. And I just remember just being frustrated, and I felt rage. I felt anger. I don't know. And then we're still sitting there. So it's not like we've moved to a location where there's cover now. Like, we're still just sitting there. thankfully, like the insurgents, quit their nonsense, and maybe we shot at them enough to deter them from any other action. But we're just sitting there. I don't even remember if we continued that mission. I just don't remember. For me, in my mind, that's where the story stops. Is after Dries got hit or Dries got shot, and all the things that were running through my mind, and going into their talk, and exchanging words with their leadership, and and then walking back to our formation, checking if everybody was all, like, and of course all this stuff is done over the radio, or you're looking back, like, I mean, trying to see where the casualty was, and like all, like, it just, there was a lot of stuff going on. And like I remember I was trying I was trying to make a lot of decisions, but I remember feeling like I need to make all the right decisions. This is not the time to make one more wrong decision. I remember thinking I have to make all the right decisions. And thankfully Simcoe was right there with me too. Like, so, you know, like he was, and that dude, like, I don't know, we just clicked from day one. Like, it was just crazy. But he was, when I think of what a platoon sergeant is or represents, he is it. Like if you're rolling out with Simcoe, we know we're rolling into the shit. But I know, like, hey, my platoon sergeant's back there. We're gonna be okay. So, if he ever watches this, shout out to Simcoe, man. I'll tell you another story, at maybe during this period or maybe offline, but he saved actually not really my ass. He saved my XO's ass because he was about to get fired. Different story, but
If I
yeah.
could, real quick, this your time, I got to say what's funny about what you just said. I was telling him last night about all the nice things and praise he was getting.
Oh
So
yeah,
it made me feel really happy inside that here we are once again talking about Simcoe. That guy, I hear
man.
so much praise about him. So it's definitely time to acknowledge that he was, yes, stellar NCO.
That dude is the man. Like, that dude is the man. Like I was so blessed to have him as my platoon sergeant. And like he knows what it is. Like he knows what it is. Like I
Mhm.
respect, have the utmost respect for that guy. I remember when he was retiring, I think he texted me or he called me or something. I was like, hey, like, I'm like, you're doing what? Like, you're the people that we need in the army. But he had his reasons, and it was probably the right time for him and his family. So, but yeah, shout out to Simcoe, man. Like, that's my guy. Shout out to Simcoe. Yeah. Um, but yeah, he kept me level headed. Kept me focused on what I needed to do. The times when I didn't want to do what I wanted to do or what I had to do, like, he was there, like, hey, sir, like, we got to go. Like, we have to go. Like, we have to go do this thing. You know, if I had to have write reports, because he knew, like, when we got back, the guys are working on vehicles. Some people are getting chow. I'm stuck writing reports. I don't come back till people are asleep at the tent, and then I eat cold food. And sometimes you volunteer, like, yeah, like, I'll go do the reports. I'm like, nah, Simcoe, like, you got to go manage those guys. I'll suck through this. It's okay. But he was just that guy. So shout out to Simcoe, man. But yeah, so like, yeah, but then like we just continued doing what we're doing, and um, the deployment went on, and around January timeframe, I had to fly back. I went on leave, because that's when my son was going to be born. I was there. I think I showed up in like maybe like three, 3 or 5 days. I want to say like 3 days later, he was born, which was perfect. Because I would have been really, really disgruntled if I missed my son's birth. Um, but yeah, like, yeah, but maybe 3 days after I got there, he was born. I stayed there for another like 10 days, something to that effect, because it was two week leave. Yep. And then I was on the next thing smoking, you know, right back to Afghanistan. I also remember it was weird. Like I was there, but I wasn't there. Like I kept feeling like I was missing something. Like I felt like I felt like I wouldn't be able to, like the battle space would have changed so much that when I got back, it would be like a restart for me, you know. And then now I'm like putting my guys in jeopardy. Like I almost felt like I was abandoning my guys. Like it was really weird. Uh, it was really weird, but we got back, and I got back, and it was missions as usual. You know, I got a update on all the stuff that's happened, and you know, it was missions as usual. You know, and um, but yeah, we got back to it, and before you knew it, we were ripping out with the incoming unit that was going to take over. I think it was a National Guard unit that was going to be taking over us. Like the second half, it seemed like I'm sure it was slow, but it seemed like to fast forward a lot.
Mhm.
And then the next thing that jolted us was Povolitis. Like that was the next thing, and that was another like he was another solid NCO. Like he was a solid guy. Solid in every sense, you know, like his personality, his build. I mean, he was an older guy too, you know, and I remember oh man, Povolitis. Like I remember being in the gym with him, right? I was in the gym, like doing my thing in the gym. Um, because that was my stress relief. Like I just go to the gym and lift weights. And I was squatting that day, and he comes by and he's like, "That's all you got?" And I thought I was already going heavy, you know. Like I think at that point I was like, I was benching like three something. I say benching, squatting like three something. He was like, "That's all you got? Like you need to fix those chicken legs." He just cracked a joke, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds like a challenge to me." So we started packing plates on. Like he was the first person with him. I went, I think 415 on my squats. And I was like, I don't know, 150 something pounds, you know, like I'm lifting three times my weight.
Mhm.
But that was with him. And that was just him saying the little things he said, you know, like challenge accepted, like, let's get after it. And so he was a great influence. Like I remember working out in the gym, and I'd be like, man, like I want to get a physique like his. Like, I mean, that dude is like he's ripped, like I was already ripped too, but it was like he was a second level, like the next level of ripped, And I was like, man, like and he's an older guy. Like, what's my excuse? Um, so when that happened to him and Jusino, like, man, that I think we were, I think we were on that path. You get to that robotic. It's not we weren't at complacency yet. You were at the point where things are just robotic. We know the routes. We know where all the danger points are. We know these people's TTPs. You know, we've in our minds we've tricked them enough to not be able to anticipate our movement. So you'll get into the point where you're just comfortable, and then that happens, and you're just like, okay, right back to the basics. Because so now the theme is like we have to finish strong. Um, this will really suck if we lose somebody at the tail end of this thing. Like that was our wake up call, and everybody understood that, and then we got right back to doing the hard things that we had gotten good at and put on the shelf. We got right back to doing the hard things again, and pretty soon we had the redeployment briefs, and we were out of there, you know. And I remember just towards the end, it almost felt like I wasn't. I almost felt like I wasn't too worried about the missions anymore. I think I was concentrating more now on managing behaviors and personalities towards the end, because it's the little things that'll get you, you know, like we didn't do the maintenance on the vehicle and the maintenance packed up on us. Now we got to get a record to come out here. We're just sitting ducks for the next like hour, 2 hours, whatever, like just little things, So I remember for me, the it shifted from, you know, combat to managing people, their actions and personalities. And me and Simcoe, we would talk, and and he would talk to the squad leaders, and squad leaders would push that intent down to the team leaders and to the soldiers, and we'll talk about it like during our AARs, and we'll talk about it like right before we roll out, and but yeah, it's almost like let's just hold what we got until we leave. Let's just hold what we got until we leave. Um, like our dismounting, like we would dismount, but I think I pulled back quite a bit on the dismounting towards the end. Um, if there was no need for us to dismount, we didn't dismount, you know. Because I always told the guys, I was like, listen, like, what is our mission? Route clearance.
Mhm.
Route clearance it does not require you, running into a village chasing a bad guy. Like that's the infantry's mission. It sounds sexy as hell, and I know you want to go do that. If you're into chasing badges and you're not gonna do it with me, because my obligation is to your family, is get you back alive to your family. Like every other thing is secondary. All these, the awards and the ribbons, and don't me personally don't care about it. So there's no reason for us to go put ourselves in harm's way. At the same time, we're not running away from a fight now. Like if a fight comes to us, we're gonna take it to them, but we're not we're not taking over the infantry's role. Period. Like we're a route clearance. We have our mission, and that's all we're gonna do. Let the infantry take care of the infantry, and we will do route clearance stuff, and that's it. And that's what we did until we rolled out of there. So, um, no, it was a that was a very interesting deployment. Like no doubt about it. I know at some point, Captain Lau switched out, and I think it was Captain Wolf that came on board. And I think the first sergeant switched out as well. I think First Sergeant Gorgeous switched out as well.
He did.
I can't remember. He did.
Brinkley,
He did, right?
Brinkley
Yep.
became the new one.
Brinkley. Yeah, there you go. Yep. So, but yeah, because I mean, switching leadership like that during a deployment, that's kind of dangerous. I don't know what the decision making was, but that's kind of dangerous. Um, I guess it wouldn't be too much of an impact with, I don't know, like, but I think that they staggered it, if I'm not mistaken. It wasn't all this at the same time. There was a little bit of uh, lag between when the company commanders switched out and when the first sergeants switched out. So that there was enough time to have that left seat, right seat, but still, I don't know if I don't know if that was a good decision, but seemed like it worked a little bit. So I don't know, whatever the measure of it worked is, but um, right, you know, but that's I remember feeling uneasy. I'm like, man, like everyone has just gotten. It's the same feeling I had when I switched out with Demona. We now know each other. We know what we're supposed to be doing, and now we're switching somebody out, and it's like, ooh, I don't know, like how does this person like their information? Are they gonna be like the gung ho type versus, the very reserved type and calculated type? You know, is this gonna be when we're briefing you, we're gonna be wasting time putting PowerPoints together versus getting the troops ready to roll out? Like, I mean, there's just a lot to, but thankfully that team, they just held on to whatever the process and procedures were that First Sergeant Gordis and Captain Lau put in place, and that was it. So I was grateful for that. And then so here's another tidbit. So while I was deployed, I got picked up for PA school. Go figure, right? Because I put it in a packet before I left, or maybe like when we first got there. I can't remember when I put it in the packet now, but I got picked up for PA school. And so the lady's reaching out to me via email, the physician assistant
Okay,
program.
I wasn't knowing what PA was.
Yeah, the physician assistant program. Um, so so I was gonna be a physician assistant, so one of the docs on the battlefield. Because that was my background anyways, was pre-med. Um, so I got picked up while I was there. And I had to tell the lady, I was like, listen, I'm a platoon leader. I sent her an email back saying I'm a platoon, I'm grateful for this. I'm a platoon leader. I'm a Rocklands platoon leader. Like I'm in combat right now. Like I would feel so guilty leaving my guys right now, you know. And so I put that on the shelf, and thankfully, like they were graceful enough to hold my spot until I came back, which I heard that they never did. Um, but I ended up not going that route anyway because there was something about they had to recalculate your rank, and so that drops you down in time in service, time in grade.
Hmm.
And then they had changed one of their requirements where I think you had to shadow either a physician assistant or doctor or surgeon. You had to shadow one of those guys for like 40 hours, which was not a requirement before. And I started putting all that stuff together. I was like, listen, like when I get back, my son would be 6 months old. I hadn't, like I'd seen him for like a couple of days and then I left, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had that discussion with my wife, and I was like, I'm like, do I do I get back from deployment, do all the pre-deployment stuff, and then take off back to PA school, which is another 2 year commitment? And I ended up just deciding, nah, like I'm just gonna can it. So that dream, that dream of being a doc just went out the window, just like that, But I don't regret it. I mean, I went on to do good things with the engineers and company command and staff time and all kinds of shenanigans. Worked in Japan, as a with USACE, built some hospitals out,
Oh,
expanded a hospital out there. Um, did some really cool projects, like built a motor pool out there, like one of the like most futuristic motor pools. Like it was the concept was a green motor pool. So all the water that we use to, you wash, it gets recycled through, filtered through, and you can reuse it. Like it was all kinds of high tech stuff. So like I was involved in building stuff like that. Like
it's cool.
um yeah, so that was great for me. I got to see the other side of engineering, and so that was great for me. And in Japan of all places too, oh, that was a blast, That was such a blast. And Tokyo was like, I don't know, like 30 minutes away from where we were stationed at. So it was a blast, Beautiful people, beautiful country, and anybody who can get there, go get there and have an experience of a lifetime. But and then came back to the States. Of course, that's when COVID was happening, and did all that command and staff, command and general staff college and all that nonsense. Did all that, and then I retired. I just retired in February this year after almost 25 years in.
Whoa.
Um, yeah, so it's been wonderful. Like it, it's been wonderful. Like I have nothing bad to say about the military. The military has been absolutely amazing. Like absolutely amazing. Um, it just got to the point where like you're in managerial positions where you're not doing any of the doing. You're the one who's creating all the plans. Yeah, it's like, man, like I'm creating all these fun plans and somebody else is gonna go execute it. I can't even partake in all this awesomeness, you know. It just got to the point where it got a little boring and I was just like, okay, like, I got to do something else, you know. I think it's time. And they tell you like, you know, when it's time, you know, when it's time, you'll know it's time. And it was time for me. Like, so, you know, I still have, you know, I still keep contact with, you know, some of the dudes, you know, that I served with um over the years. Um I never I felt like I never had a connection, like that kind of connection to the 22nd. You know, I mean, you know, I did my job and, you know, I did what I had to do at the time, but I just feel like I never had that deep connection. Um, which sucks because I mean, there were some really good dudes there, you know. Because I mean, like I told you in the beginning, you know, coming in, you know, my sentiments, you know, about, you know, some of the lieutenants and
Mhm.
so you couldn't bond there. And then of course you're a lieutenant yourself, so you can't fraternize with the enlisted folks, you know. So that's that. So that just leaves you and maybe one or two lieutenants that, you know, maybe, you know, you can relate to. I mean, Bobby Gonzalez, me and him stayed close for a couple of years. I mean, when I was in Japan, he came out there to see me. He had a great time out there, you know. Shout out, shout out to Bobby Gonzalez, man. That's another good dude. He's a really good dude. Um, um, but yeah, so I didn't really have that deep connection with the. And when I got back, um, there was a opportunity that opened up with the 508th MP Brigade. No, 42nd MP Brigade, 508th MP Battalion. There was a billet for a battalion engineer, and so I went and filled that billet because that would provide me time to finish up my uh, college, so I meet the requirements that the Army, you know, um, afforded me to get my bachelor's and stay as a lieutenant or stay as an officer. So that opportunity opened up, and you know, Captain Al, you know, he knew what my situation was, and
Mhm.
he's like, yeah, that you'll have some free time over there. So, and so I went there and did that over there, which is funny. My leadership were all 82nd guys. So, so we loved, I mean, they loved me and I loved them. And, you know, my XO was an 82nd guy. My S3 was an 82nd guy. And my battalion commander was an 82nd guy. So they put quite a bit of responsibility on. Matter of fact, I don't know if it's even still back there. Me and my team, we built like an engineer warehouse, like an engineer shed back there um, for the 508th MP battalion because we had partnerships with Habitat for Humanity. So we did a lot of construction stuff. Um, and we needed a place exclusive for us to do our engineer work. Um, our battalion commander, he was a woodworking guy, so he really appreciated the I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen an officer that appreciated the engineers like he did. Like he was an MP, and anytime engineers came up, I mean, he just lit up and he starts talking about construction stuff. And
Go
I
on.
mean, yeah, he was Davey, I think was his name. Really good dude, really good dude. He was a twin. That was a different story because sometimes his twin would show up and we wouldn't know who was who. But that was a different scenario. But he loved the engineers, so he gave us that shed and he was like, "Hey, make it yours." So we just transformed it into our workshop. Like it was amazing. My team and I also built, and this is still at JBLM. the 42nd MP Brigade Memorial, we built that.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I was in JBLM sometime 2 years ago, maybe. And I went back there to see, and it was still there. I mean, even if you, I'm sure if you Google it, you'll see it. It's like a 3-pillar type of deal, and or 1 pillar type of deal, and then 3 seats in front of it. It was yeah, so it was me and my team that built that. So like, yeah, the Army has been absolutely amazing. I mean, there are things that I've done in my career that I could take my kids back and literally like see, feel, touch, smell, like this is what we accomplished, and that's very gratifying, you know. Even the deployments, as bad as they were, like some of the incidents that were, within our deployments, like all those experiences, like I don't know what everybody else's experience is, but it helped shape me into who I am today. So I just, it's, man, it's, as I'm saying all this stuff, it's almost like I'm realizing that I repressed a lot of, or maybe just control alt delete all the stuff that's happened in my career.
Mhm.
But as I'm verbalizing this stuff to you, like it's like, man, like, you know, we accomplished some things,
Mhm.
like the platoon, my platoon, all the platoons that went out there, kicked ass and took names, like, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for everyone who was on that deployment or any other deployment, you know, like, but the things that we accomplished there, like, folks need to really look back at what their roles were and be proud of what they did, you know, like be proud of what they did. So, um, but yeah, yeah, it was an amazing ride, but you know, like they say, all good parties have to come to an end. So,
I guess so.
yep, it was a last call for alcohol for me, and it was time for me to punch out. So, but yeah, it's been absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. Um, but like I told you, I don't know how much time we have left.
6.5 minutes.
Okay,
And you
so
might owe us a story about how Simcoe saved the Exo's ass.
oh yeah, for sure, I got to tell that story. Yeah. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and tell that story now, and then we'll segue into something else.
Okay.
So I was the S4 for my battalion. I had just taken over. Our XO at the time, um, we were supposed to be deploying to JRTC, and I don't know if the XO knew or didn't know. I don't know what the miscommunication was, but there were some meetings at Core that he was supposed to be attending that somehow the ball dropped and he wasn't attending, or he wasn't like fully engaged. So he asked one day, an email comes through his desk. He's like, "Yeah, NJ, can you go take this meeting for me?" Cool. I go up there, and the G3, is like, "All right," he calls my unit. He was like, "Give me an update." And I'm just like, update on what? Like, what do you want to know? So automatically he knew, like, I feel like, okay, this guy is probably not read in, or something's off. He's like, "Hey, just stand by." He went through everybody else, and then afterwards he called me. He's like, "Okay, so let me let you know what's going on in case you haven't been briefed, because I could tell from your rank, things are like somebody skipped you. So because you're not the one who's supposed to be here, your XO is supposed to be here. So I'll give you a pass. But here's what's supposed to be happening." And he laid out all the stuff that we're supposed to do in preparation for our deployment to JRTC, vehicles and staging, and we have done nothing. We had done nothing, like little to nothing. And I was like, oh crap. So I'm trying to figure out like how we're gonna get all our vehicles to JRTC. That's not doable. In the time frame we have right now, that boat has sailed literally. I was like, so who do I know? I was like, Simcoe is in JRTC. So I'm calling Simcoe, I'm texting him. Simcoe is not responding to my calls or my texts. I'm just like, what the hell? Like, this is the bad time to like block me, you know? Like, oh my gosh. Finally, he calls me back one day after work. Hey, sir, how's it going? Like, I saw like a million missed calls from you and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, bro, like, I've been trying to get to you, like, get in contact with you for the past, like, I don't know, maybe like a week. He's like, yeah, what's going on? So I told him, I'm like, long story short, I need your entire fleet, all your vehicles, because we're going to become the JRTC. We can't bring ours because we've missed the timeline for that. And like somebody's going to get fired. Probably not going to be me.
Right.
It's probably going to be an XO type and a battalion commander type. Like, but I need your help, man. He's like, bro, like we're in the field. But I'll tell you what, what's your timeline? I told him my timeline, and he was like, okay, we could probably make this work. I'm gonna go talk to my XO and let him know what's going on. Because when we come back, we're gonna spend 2 days or 3 days, or I think it was 2 days. After we come back, we're gonna spend just washing out all the vehicles, TI everything, and just make sure everything is straight for you guys for your rotation at JRTC. And then you guys can come in and sign in for the vehicles. I was like, bro, like if you could swing that, man, I'm gonna be like forever grateful. Yeah, he came through.
Yeah.
And I told my battalion commander what had happened because we had not. So I had told my battalion commander the position we were in. I told him I had a way out that would keep all of us in our jobs. But he was nervous, man. Him and the were nervous. And Simcoe came through, man. They came out of the field and all they did was wash vehicles. Matter of fact, while we were assigning for vehicles, he was still sending people to go keep washing vehicles. And it was that much like a battalion work. Like it was a lot of vehicles, bro. Like, but I got all his vehicles, and that's what we used for a JRTC rotation until we could get augmented vehicles from JRTC. But pretty much his vehicles are what we used. We came in and we fell in on all his vehicles. My battalion commander was like, I don't know how you pull this off, but literally, like I think like all three of us would have lost our jobs. I'm like, no. I'm like, so I told him what I had done, and I was like, yo, like my old platoon sergeant, he's a first sergeant now, and he's the one who made this happen. So it's not me doing it, it's him doing it.
So
So
we're at less than a minute. So
okay.
pause here. Do you got time to come back for one more?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, let's
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
All right. So one, again, I want to thank you for sharing your story. And it seems like we're at the point that kind of concludes your story. And I noticed you had some really unique experience, and I'd like to do some follow-up questions on that. And one of them I'd like to see is you came from a different culture where you said, people are on a first name basis, they're really tight, there was tons of support. And then you got to the 22nd and you saw there wasn't enough support for the troops, and you had some issues with the family readiness group. And if you could kind of tell us, what does good support look like and what did the 22nd need? And then following up from that, just if you had suggestions moving ahead as an organization, how can we do it better to get support that the troops need?
Okay, so I'm gonna try and layer this.
Sure.
So I'll start with the troops. I think the troops we had great NCOs, right? I don't know if personnel were being pulled from different places, and so there was not that discipline structure established. I remember feeling the lower enlisted folks were they're very tight knit. I remember feeling that. I mean, that was almost palpable. So their interactions with each other, they were very tight knit. I remember feeling the NCOs, at least the platoon sergeants, were very tight. I didn't have a good beat on the squad leaders, team leaders, because I didn't look at that level, because they were off always like doing the platoon sergeant's bidding, so they weren't really there for me to really assess deeply. But I know that they were respected by the junior enlisted. I think the lieutenants, there was a, and I don't mean this to sound negative, but there was a level of immaturity, and not from the standpoint of competence, because I mean, they were as competent as the schools that they had gotten to could take them. You know, as far as those schools can take them, they were that competent. So, but it was a how to manage personnel. And I'm not saying I was any better than them, but I'd had the experience, and I knew what right looked like, and I knew what wrong looked like. So on the lieutenant level, the tactical competence and their ability to manage the personnel was there. It's just there was just that. It's always just that one thing that's just off, like that. And I don't know, like I think it just boils down to, at least the word I can use to describe it was immaturity, and not in a negative way. It's just they knew as much as the schools that they've attended could take them. As far as those schools could take them, is that's where their knowledge base ended. The first sergeant, I mean, First Sergeant Gorgeous, he was a good first sergeant in my opinion. Captain Lau, so the XO, I think the XO had that level of immaturity as well. I forget his name now. He was a good dude. Good dude, you know, did his best to manage the company, because managing that company was not a small feat. So he accomplished that. Like, but the relationship between the XO and the platoon sergeants and PLs, I don't think they trusted him. And so there was somewhat of a disconnect. Captain Lau, I mean, he wasn't a bad company commander. You know, he did his best to get us ready, especially, you know, being, you know, getting all these orders from higher, and, you know, the need to execute and, you know, turn things, you know, around quickly. I don't know if that was his first company. It almost seemed like it. And when that's your first company that you're spinning, it's your first company, it's a new company, a whole bunch of brand new dudes that you're spinning up to go to take to a deployment in 6 months. So a recipe for this, it's almost like a setup. I don't think he was ready for it. But he did phenomenal, and he did well in getting us ready. And then you had battalion, that all they did all day was push down stuff, execute, execute, execute. And it almost like it was almost like there was no long range planning. It's almost like right now, right now, right now, we had, you know, Sergeant Paleo or, Sergeant Fuller or, Sergeant Simcoe or any of the PLs could be doing this. And all of a sudden, they need to shift focus and focus on this thing that battalion just sent down the pike. Like, so I could always sense that frustration from the group as a whole. I think that all that when you layer it like that and you compress it into a 6-month, 7-month time frame with soldiers working long hours, that is a recipe for disaster. That's when all the demons come out, which was evidenced by all the drinking, the misuse of substances, especially prior to a deployment. That's the kind of stuff that happens after the deployment. This was happening before the deployment. So that's all that it's almost like a pressure, like a pressure cooker just waiting to explode. Like all that pressure just building up and just waiting to, and the way that you release that pressure is as best as you can, as the schedule has to involve family time. You have to have time for soldiers to go decompress, leave work at decent hours. It's bad enough that Washington, with the weather and the darkness comes like really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really easy to fool your mind into like, man, I just got here and now it's dark, like, and you start thinking it's nighttime already. So even something as simple as release soldiers before the sun goes down. Now, I don't know what time frame, maybe it's not an everyday thing, but if you could manage your time to where it could trick them into, I still have most of my day because the sun's out.
Mm-hmm.
Something as minute as that, I think might have made a difference. But overall, it's just a brand new unit trying to get ready in that short period of time and working those long hours, recipe for disaster. And then, I mean, you probably remember this. I mean, there's sometimes when you look into platoons, and it's like three dudes or 4 dudes. Everybody else is scattered to schools.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you come back from the schools, then it's this person didn't go to the school, so he doesn't understand what I'm doing. And then how do you cross level all that training? Like we were doing way too much in that short period of time. Like that was my feeling. The FRG, the way that plays into the deployments, I know most units don't take their FRG serious. I know it's, an uphill battle trying to get people to FRG meetings because it's well, I just went home and now I have to go change and come back and this other stuff. But it didn't have to stay in that format. The FRG meetings don't have to be meetings. They could be gatherings. Like, let's just go have donuts over here and we just talk. Let's any like, hey, we're gonna gather over here, at this restaurant. Whoever wants to show up, show up. Initially, you're gonna find people like not everybody's ever gonna show up to those things, period. Like, just accept that. But if it's fun enough the first time, that word will spread. Oh man, we went to this restaurant and we went to this, laser tag thing, or we went to this like whatever event it is. That news will spread, and the other person that missed it will be like, oh man, I missed that. Now they start anticipating what the next one is gonna be. So we did a lot of stuff like in my prior units, we did stuff I mean, folks would just, hey, let's meet up at some place in the woods and let's just go walking. You know, I remember one time we went to where was I? It was somewhere in Texas. We got up early, you know, met up at a like a donut, coffee shop, donut shop, got some breakfast real quick, you know, went hiking. We didn't know where we were and we didn't know where we were going. We just knew that there was a trail that we could hike up and we just hiked, you know, and you know, the trail, you know, claimed some souls on the way up, but you know, but that's all we just hiked. And then at the end of it, you know, we sat around and, you know, opened our bags and whatever you had in your bags to eat. And then we just talked about, you know, how to support the unit. And, you know, it's just like thinking outside the box, you know, having barbecues at people's houses, you know, like, it doesn't have to be the formal, let's go get in a room over here and sit around tables that we've been sitting around all day and look
Mhm.
at the same board that we've been looking at all day. Like, you know, so, you know, there was a better way. But again, I'm saying this now. I'm saying this now freely. But you know, at a time, people do what they can with what they have. So,
Mhm.
um, and I didn't, like, quite frankly, like I didn't feel. Again, I'm the new guy. I don't know anybody. I don't know anything. Like I'm technically the new guy. It's not my. I didn't feel it was my place to go tell the company commander, hey, you know, you're doing all this wrong. Like you should do this better. He has better things to think about. You know, like, oh, maybe not better things, but he has a lot of things to think about. So changing the format of things and let's think outside the box or an FRG group and this and that. Would it have helped? Yeah, but was it my position? No. So
So if I may kind of inject and ask a question related to that. So when you deployed, you have an expectant wife. What was the expectation of FRG to help support you as a family?
the expectation was little. It was let's have other people that if she needs, maybe the car breaks down, she can call this person and say, hey, you know, come pick me up. Or if something goes out and, you know, the bulb goes out, like, you know, or hey, I've been stuck in my, you know, house X amount, I just need somebody to talk to, or somebody to go on a walk with, or somebody to just let's go run errands together. Like just to build those kind of bonds. Like that's what the expectation was. But I didn't feel that there were any bonds being created during the FRG. If
Right.
anything, there was more. There was one time there was like bickering going on,
Mhm.
you know, and so it didn't seem like it was that. Again, I was used to different FRGs. This was like a what is this kind of FRG? Like, and again, I'm this is not an indictment on anyone's character or you know what their capabilities were. It's just what I saw. And then that's when I told my wife, like, you can't stay here by yourself because you can't, I mean, you have no support. So the best decision for you is to go back and hang with your folks. Just put our stuff in storage and go back and just go live with your folks. And that's what she did. Because at
So
least we'll have at least there will be um that support from family. So
right. So I never engaged with FRG. So and part of that was because I lived 80 miles away. So I was always like booking it home to because it was like an hour 20 drive. But if I'm hearing you right, what it should look like is soldiers and their families would go to like unorthodox meetings, maybe barbecues at different places, build these relationships. So when you deploy, the family has established supports in those groups?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And again, it doesn't have to be, say for instance, we would have like in some of the units I've been in, we would do things that were value added. Well, what are some things that are value added? Well, does the spouse know how to manage their finances? When you get all this deployment money and all of a sudden you have this overinflated sense of I'm rich, what can you do with that money?
Mhm.
How do you spend that money? How do you budget that money? We had experts come out and talk about it. Hell, we would have people like we had uh and this is like, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is like, you know, it's spread out throughout different units, but when we're in soft, like I mean, we would have people come out for PT. The wives will come out for PT, or the husbands or whoever. And an instructor, like a certified, like civilian type instructor would teach us the proper form of how to run long distance runs.
Wow, that's cool.
Like I never knew until then. I thought you just get ready, set, go. Like that's all I ever did. But no, there's a way. Like a certain angle, you lean forward, down slope. You know, there's a certain way you go uphill. There's a certain way you go. The way the balls of your feet hit the floor, the way you should um bend your knees a little bit so that your knees are not taking all this, like all this crazy stuff. I'm just like, who knew?
Mhm.
You know? And so, but those are the ways that we did stuff. You know, oh man, this is a funny one. I remember once one of my buddies ran. This is when I was with Soft. One of my buddies ran over a freaking deer on his way to work. The dude stopped the truck, put the deer in the back, and then we freaking skinned the deer because we had a lab, you know, where we could process. Skinned the deer, got all the meat, and he cut up all the meat. We barbecued some, we took some home, but then we called hey, you know, we're having lunch today. Just impromptu, like, if you're available for lunch, come through. Like, and we just sat out on the lawn eating freaking barbecue. Like, it's, but it's those kind of things. Like again, it doesn't have to be like everybody come over here and let's go.
Mhm.
No, like whoever's available, just show up. Like
Mhm.
we're doing, it's impromptu. We just got this meat right here. Like, hey, somebody, Bobby, whip out the grill, and he starts filleting stuff, and people are sitting on the lawn. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh man, then you have the itis, and you're like, your belly's full, and you're like, I want to go to work today. Like, yeah, let's just call it good. The commander's like, that sounds good with me. Like, and we're out. Like, that was it. All the stuff that we planned, that we just had a meeting this morning that we have to do, that's due tomorrow. Everybody was just like, yeah, we'll just come in tomorrow early and do it. But those are the kind of units that's the kind of mentality I was used to.
Mhm.
Um, versus the regular army, like structured like stuff. But yeah, so going back to your question, like what did what would support look like? That's what support would look like. It would look like you guys getting together to do things to build relationships. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint stuff.
Mhm.
It's really building the relationships, and when people come into the unit, put your arms around them and welcome them in, not, you know, immediate conflict, like that's what I have never seen a unit where somebody well, I don't, well, now I'm thinking about it, I don't think I have witnessed that. But whenever new folks show up, there is a there's a couple of arms that go around the person
Mhm.
and get them right, And so, but for me,
Mhm.
I didn't get that. And maybe it was a timing issue. Maybe it was a timing issue because again, like I said, like block league was happening, and so there's this requirement to get all this stuff done before you leave on block leave. So you're not a a priority. So I totally get that, but it still did happen. It still happened. So, but yeah.
So I'm hearing it does two things really well, and then I'd like to get uh your impression of if I got the theory of this correct. But one, it builds bonds between the people in the unit. So your experience, it would change your experience in that sense. It builds bonds and support for the wife and kids and getting the
Yep.
families together. So the theory is when you deploy, that you don't have to worry about not being there to take care of those things because that support should be there in place for
Yep.
them. They know where they're going
Yep.
to get it. And then so in your military career, what has support meant for you, and how do you think it led to, it sounds like you had a pretty positive outcome all said and done. How has support played a role in your experience with your career?
Oh man, it's been everything. I mean, it's been everything. Like, I mean, I could tell you, like, I'll give you some instances. Like when I went to Japan, um, like we had just no. So I went to Japan in 2018. We had bought a house in North Carolina in 2016, and we had created friends within the unit and outside the unit.
Mhm.
And so when I was gone, I mean, one of the guys, one of the SF dudes, I mean, I still have pictures of it. He went to my house, had the organized and did a birthday party for my daughter. Brought all their friends, did the splash park thing, and in my house. Right. Him, his wife, and whoever else they invited. But he
Mhm.
was the one who was running it. Like,
Mhm.
you know. So I mean, I still have pictures of that. And those are the kind of things, like when my wife sent me pictures like that, I was like, man, like, okay, good. Like, I mean, it'd be
Right.
nice for me to be there, but somebody's filling in the spot.
Mhm.
Right. It's little things like that. It doesn't have this thing, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be big. It's just the little things. You know, if there's a birthday happening, you know, get the birthday together or get the kids together. The same another, I think it was another guy, got all the kids together and took them to a bouncy house. And there's pictures of him included, like jumping around in trampolines and whatnot. And, you know, like, this is a big old burly dude, like, like a whole bunch of kids, like, and then the wives, they go do like their shopping or whatever it is that they, pedicures, manicures, shopping, and they just go do wife stuff.
Mhm.
And the dude is managing the kids and at the bouncy house. It's little things like that, and that's what support looks like when deployments happen.
Mhm.
So that's what that's what I'm used to. That's what I've always been used to. So it was very different. It was a very different experience from that I saw at 22nd or 14th Engineers period. Um, but again, I mean, you only know what you know, and
Right.
you do what you can with what you're given. So like I said, I don't want this to be an indictment on anybody's abilities or character. Or I just was used to very different. It's the same way, like in my deployments, I was used to eating steak and lobster and getting booze flown in, and like, I was used to all that kind of stuff. So like us having it in Passab, which that was a morale booster, by the way. But us having it in Passab, like the prior deployments, that was not a thing. You just ate MREs.
Mhm.
And then when I come back and tell the dudes, hey man, like I just had lobster, I had the locals cook for us. They're like, what? What part of the war are you in? But it was small teams and we all took care of each other. And here's a funny story. Uh oh, we had to go establish some combat outpost somewhere. It was a Organu, some I can't remember the name now. But anyways, it doesn't matter. So a handful of dudes. We get out there. This was in Afghanistan. We get out there, and those of us who are handy start like putting structures together. So we're out of the elements. Those of us who are technically inclined go start putting, uh, trying to establish light and all kinds of stuff. We hadn't taken showers for like God knows how long. We do long movements and all that kind of stuff. But finally, like somebody had like one of those like boilers, like the coils, whatever. Anyways, we found a like a 50-gallon drum and somehow rigged up to where like we could stick the boiler coil into the 50-gallon drum and just leave it for extended periods with the small generator that we had. We would leave it on for like maybe 30 minutes before, and that'd heat up water enough for it to be warm water for us to take showers. This was in the wintertime. It's like freezing cool. So warm water was a welcome like
Sure.
relief, right? Well, somebody forgot to ground the damn thing. And so we're getting electrocuted, but it was funny as just picture this. Naked dudes with their NBC boots all screaming in the shower, but enjoying it because that's the only shower we've had in goddamn weeks. It was freaking nuts.
Oh,
you know? So some dude came in, he had goggles on, he had the NBC gloves on, he had the boots on too, like and, but but that kind of support. And we
right.
just laughed about it. Um, so that's what I'm used to. It's that level of camaraderie that I'm used to. But anyways, again, like we all did what we could with what we had. It's easy for me to sit back here and quarterback the whole thing and see what could have been done better and blah blah blah. But um, at the time, I mean, you do what you can with what you have, and so kudos to everyone who did what they did. Like
Mm.
because at the end, I mean, it supported. It maybe didn't support everyone, but it supported somebody. You
Well,
know.
yeah, and I don't think we're trying to criticize everything. I think we're looking at how we can do it better for the people that are following us. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. But yeah, so that's for me. That'd be what support looks like. Just think outside the box. It doesn't have to be people sitting in classrooms and you know the same old pizza and think outside the box. Like there's other, you know what I mean?
same old pizza.
right? There are other things that can be done uh, to make it something that people want to come to. Because that's the key. You want people to come there. You can, unfortunately, you can't mandate them. So you have to make it such that it's value add so that they want to come there. And again, you're not going to ever have 100%, but you'll get close. And then the news will spread. So mission accomplished. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like hearing about, the opportunity to bring in experts and stuff. And when you mentioned value added, yeah,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Well,
So
that you just gave me like 40 minutes of your time talking about supports, and I appreciate that. And I just leave it. Was there anything else you'd want to cover with the time?
how much time do we have? Roughly
8 minutes, 30 seconds.
8 minutes.
Mm.
Okay. So I think I would just, I don't know, um, like you mentioned, or maybe I mentioned, like I didn't, I've 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 heard some of the stories, and I seen what some folks um experienced,
Mhm.
the aftershock of combat, and first of all, like my heart goes out to anyone who's had to deal with inner demons or still dealing with those demons. My heart goes out to them. Um, but we are trained to take care of ourselves. Readiness is a big thing that has been drummed into all of us. So just take the time to you have to sit in whatever it is that you think you've accomplished or done, or you have to sit in it, evaluate it, and see it for what it is. And then you should go seek the help that you need. And I don't know, everybody, deals with things differently. I didn't have any of that. Um, in a weird way, maybe the fact that I didn't have, tight bonds uh in the unit, maybe that was a catalyst or not a catalyst, but you know, assisted me with dealing with whatever it is I need to deal with. I don't know, but I never felt anything. I came back from war. I came back from Afghanistan. I got moved to a new unit. I started doing new unit stuff and trying to finish up my degree. And I was off to captain's career course, and then events and events and events, and life just happened, and that was it. Like that was my progression. Like, and so I never had a chance to even think about the war. Like a lot of the stuff that we talked about tonight, uh, was stuff that was elicited by just the discussion that we've had. Like I don't think I purposely repressed
Mm.
anything. I just went on with life, and that was it. So I consider myself lucky. I don't know, man. This, it might show up at a later time. I don't know. I seriously doubt it, but because my personality, like in my mind, and I'm not trying to trivialize anything anybody's going through, but in my mind, it's another bar story for me, right? But that's how I deal with it. That's how I deal with it. It's something to laugh at. It's a great story. Like I told you about the dudes getting electrocuted.
Mm.
Like it's just another, to me, it's another bar story. And that's just my personality. Maybe that's how I dealt with it. I don't know. Um, but the folks who are struggling with it, like reach out to who you need to reach out to. If you need to reach out to anybody, I mean, I know, like I mentioned, that I didn't have any tight bonds. Listen, I'm in Kansas. Uh, reach out to me if you're ever in Kansas area. Like reach out to anyone who can relate to what you're going through. My neighbor that lives across the street on the other side of my subdivision, he's an old Vietnam vet, and from time to time I talk to him, and he just unloads on me. But the one day he started, like, I almost saw a tear. Like he was like, I haven't talked about any of this since I left in '69 or whatever year it was. He was like, man, like it's like a weight lifted off my shoulder. And so from time to time, I just go and I just talk to him and just let him just tell me. He took me to his house. He showed me all his memorabilia, pictures, and so everyone has a different way of dealing with things. So just take the time to evaluate what you need to deal with, and get right. Kudos to the folks who, like, you know have issues with alcohol, that have dealt with it and put it behind. Man, that is tough. I've never been a big drinker, or I smoke cigars from time to time, but I imagine that is tough. I imagine that is tough. So shout out to whoever is dealing with that stuff. With the substance abuses, or like, just one day at a time, and you'll get there. But just seek the help that you need. Um, but yeah, fortunately for me, like, life just happened, and it was just a compounding of requirements that just, I think, that kept my mind off of it, I guess. So,
Mm.
um, like, even now that I'm out of the army, like, I'm a real estate agent in the Kansas, and licensed in Kansas and Missouri, and that takes up all my time now. And matter of fact, uh, recently I was like, man, that's not taking up most of my time, so I need to fill up my time, and so I'm looking to, like, you know probably get like a desk job somewhere. But I think my go-to has always been the gym and working. It just consumes you know my mind, and I just focus on that. So if woodworking is your thing, or fixing cars is a thing, or whatever hobby it is, skydiving. I mean, I used to skydive. Like, I found it exhilarating, because when you're up there, you're not thinking of anything else but, let me just know when to pull this freaking ripcord. Right? So Just whatever it is that makes you happy, like delve into that, and you'll be shocked to see that just concentrating on certain things will bring you a lot of peace and joy, and just rid you of your demons. So, but yeah, other than that, like I mean, it's this has been great, man. Like, thanks again for the forum to talk about all this stuff. This has been great because a lot of stuff I totally forgot about, and I'm sure there's a lot more that I've forgotten about, um, but just talking about it, like I mean, it stirred up some really good memories. Like
Good.
the fondest memories, bar none, has been the grit. Just remembering the grit of the soldiers. Holy smokes. Like unbreakable, unshakable grit. Just they know tomorrow morning I have to roll out, and today I just got blown up, and today was a hellish day, but tomorrow I have to go do it, and they will just get up and do it all over again. Hats off to you guys for sure. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's it, man. It's been great.
All right. I appreciate your time and I want to thank you again. And we'll wrap it up with that. And just thank you so much for this opportunity to hear your story.
Yeah, no problem, Joey. Thanks again.